Hi, I'm Tricia Dunlap, Managing Partner of Dunlap Law, a small business law firm in Richmond, Virginia. Here today for video number 4 in our corporate governance series. Now, first you might ask, what is corporate governance? Well, those are the laws, regulations, rules, best practices around how companies, corporations are governed, how decisions are made on the company's behalf by the people who own and run the company. It's a very nuanced and complex area of the law, and oftentimes small business owners find themselves in trouble because they didn't understand corporate governance and they didn't get legal help when they needed it. So I've done a series of videos to give you a tiny thumbnail of some basics to understand about corporate governance. And in this video today, video number 4, I'm going to talk about your corporate minute book. Now, you may not have ever heard of this. It would not surprise me. In over 10 years of practicing law now, I would say it's very rare for a company to have an intact record book, minute book, that doesn't have any gaps in it. So let's talk about what this is so that you can understand it better and understand the importance of keeping an intact minute book. Before we get to the substance of today's video, here's a quick announcement about an exciting innovation that we're launching at Dunlap Law. We're launching an exciting innovation called Learning Communities. It's targeted to micro and small business owners who think they can't afford legal counsel. Check out the link below and sign up for updates. Thanks. Now let's get into today's video. A minute book is a documentary record of the entire history of the corporation, from the moment it is founded and formed all the way through the time of sale, perhaps, or dissolution. It's an extremely important set of documents that is generally created over a long time period. If it were a human being, I would say it's a little bit akin to your health record. If you could think back to, what's in your health record, you may have records of vaccinations that you received when you were 2 months old. And then you've also got perhaps the surgery that you had last year and then last week's doctor appointment. It's that entire record of your life and your health. That's akin to a minute book for a corporation. And it's extremely important to have it intact. I'll give you 2 examples of why. First of all, someday if you ever go to sell your company, then having an intact record minute book is going to be extremely important because the prospective buyer is going to want to review the minutes of the corporation. That buyer is going to want to look at the articles of incorporation and the bylaws, the list, the ledger of shareholders. Those kinds of records are extremely important to the due diligence process when a business gets sold. So that's one example. Another example might be if you're going to approach a bank about getting a loan. Typically, a bank is also going to want to see at least some of the records in your minute book to make sure that you, acting on behalf of the business, are authorized to act on behalf of the business. The minute book has the records that will affirm that for the bank. So those are 2 reasons why you want to have an intact minute book. Now, let's talk about what should be in your minute book. And first of all, I recommend that you not only have a literal book, a 3-ring binder where you add all of these records and maintain them over time, but that you also have an electronic record in Dropbox or Teams or SharePoint or wherever you might maintain corporate records like this. These are records you never ever want to lose. And if you have lost them, then you should get in touch because we can help you cure these problems. So at the top of the list should be the company's articles of incorporation. Now, if you're a corporation, then you will have articles of incorporation. If you have an LLC, you will have articles of organization. Similar documents, they serve the same role, they have slightly different names. We'll talk about articles of incorporation. Oftentimes, those can be very bare bones, and there are certain pieces of information that have to be in articles by Virginia law, or if a corporation has more complex needs, then it's entirely possible that attorneys have drafted a tailor-made articles of incorporation for that corporation so that they can address some of the unique needs of that company. Either way, articles of incorporation are public documents. They are maintained in the file database of the State Corporation Commission. So if you've lost your articles of incorporation, then you can go to the State Corporation Commission and get a new copy of your original articles of incorporation. Next to the articles of incorporation should be your certificate of incorporation, or if you're an LLC, it would be a certificate of organization. This is a one-page document. It has a little fancy font up at the top. This is issued by the State Corporation Commission of Virginia, Virginia State Corporation Commission, when they form your corporation or your LLC. So that certificate is proof of the actual date on which your corporation was formed by the State Corporation Commission. That's the second document you should have in your minute book. The third document you should have in your minute book, if you are a corporation, it's called Bylaws. If you are an LLC, it's called an operating agreement. My main focus in this video is on corporations because corporate governance for corporations is more complex and legally more demanding than governance for LLCs. So I'm going to stay focused on bylaws for corporations. Bylaws for corporations are all of the rules about how a corporation is actually going to function. How often will the shareholders meet? What kind of notice do shareholders get before the meeting so they can be sure to attend? What level of vote is required for shareholders to approve a certain resolution? A majority vote or perhaps supermajority? That can vary. There are also bylaws that concern directors, how directors are appointed, how many of them there are, how long their terms are, the number of directors required in order for a board meeting to meet a quorum, the other limits on directors could also be in your bylaws. There are also going to be bylaws that address what the titles are for the corporate officers: president, secretary, treasurer, vice president, things like that. The bylaws will also explain the role of the president and the treasurer and the secretary, etc. There could be also some provisions around limitations on check writing, for instance. Perhaps the bylaws are going to specify that the board has to approve any financial transaction that's greater than, say, $10,000 or some other threshold. Bylaws are private documents. They are not on file with the State Corporation Commission. They are usually very carefully drafted by an attorney because they have some pretty serious implications for the business. You need to be sure that you're governing your business in accordance to your bylaws. So you need to have them and you need to know what's in them. If you can't find your bylaws, then get in touch with us. We can help you draft new bylaws and cure that record gap. The next thing you have, item number 4 in your minute book, should be what are called organizational meeting minutes. From the moment the State Corporation Commission forms a corporation until the moment of its organizational meeting, which is the very first meeting of the board of directors, the corporation is a little bit like a zombie. It exists on paper, but until that very first board of directors meeting, which is memorialized in what are called organizational meeting minutes, it's a zombie corporation. It can't take action yet. It's the board of directors meeting at that first organizational meeting where the board of directors acts for the very first time. They adopt the bylaws, they ratify the formation of the corporation, and they take a bunch of other actions. Maybe they adopt conflict of interest policies and other things like that. Those organizational meeting minutes are extremely important. It's possible that you have those in written form. It's also possible, I'm never surprised when a corporation has a minute book that does not have their organizational meeting minutes. And essentially, without those organizational meeting minutes, the corporation has never formally and officially adopted its bylaws. So that's a problem. So that's the next document you should have. After that, you should have what's called a shareholder ledger, which is one document that lists every single shareholder in the corporation, when they got their shares, how many shares they've gotten. If those shares were ever transferred out or sold, then that would also be listed. A shareholder ledger is a definitive list of every single shareholder in a corporation. That's an extremely important document, especially if you ever go to sell the business. Accompanying a shareholder ledger, we will usually also see what are called subscription letters. So if I am buying 200 shares in Acme Incorporated, then I will sign a very simple letter that says, I, Tricia Dunlap, am buying 200 shares in Acme Corporation for $200. And then I sign that. That's my subscription letter. That should also be in the minute book. And ideally, there'll be a shareholder ledger, and for each shareholder listed, there will also be a subscription letter to go along with that shareholder. That's ideal. We don't usually see that, to be honest. Most of the time, minute books have some pretty significant gaps in them. Other items that can be in a minute book, but don't always occur, are things like a buy-sell agreement or a shareholder agreement, where everyone who owns shares has essentially agreed to some limitations on who they can sell those shares to or who they could transfer them to. That's really important if you're in what's called a closely held business, which is a business where there's a very small number of shareholders, maybe, fewer than 20 certainly, but maybe even just a handful, 5, 6 shareholders. People who go into business like that with, 4 or 5 really trusted friends don't want one person to sell their shares outside of that circle of trusted people, and then all of a sudden you've got a new shareholder whom you don't even know necessarily. A shareholder agreement or a buy-sell agreement can put limits around that, and that's a common document that we find in a minute book. Then there should be minutes for every single shareholder meeting that's ever held. There should be minutes for every single board of directors meeting that's ever held. If there are any special resolutions that need to get passed, perhaps a director resigns and the shareholders need to appoint a new director, or depending on what's in the bylaws, maybe the board of directors appoints a new director to fill that vacancy. However it's done according to the bylaws, there will often be a resolution to accompany that. And so essentially you're going to have a documentary record of every significant decision made on behalf of that corporation by the corporation's leaders, the directors and the officers, and the shareholders. So that's what should be in your minute book. I would lay money that you're going to have gaps in your minute book, because in 10 years of practicing law, I've never seen a minute book that didn't have at least 1 or 2 simple small gaps in it. It's just hard to maintain all these records over a long stretch of time. The older the company is, the more gaps there typically are. So it's important to stay on top of this. We can help with this. We can help cure gaps in your record book, and we can help you understand what your bylaws require of you, or any shareholder agreements and buy-sell agreements and that sort of thing. It's what we do. We love to do it. We love to help small business owners understand all of this stuff. It's super important, and yet for you as a small business owner, it's probably the last thing you want to think about. That's why we're here. I hope this video has been helpful. If so, please like, subscribe, and share. We have at least three other videos in the corporate governance series. I'm going to be doing a bunch of these as issues arise that I think you need to understand better. Get in touch with us if you need some help on this issue, because we'd love to help. I'm Tricia Dunlap, Managing Partner of Dunlap Law in Richmond, Virginia.